6 months after their bonding ceremony, Princess Zarathiel and Commander Marcus Chun faced their first real crisis together. It began, as many galactic disasters do, with what appeared to be a routine communication. They were in Marcus's temporary office at the human embassy when the emergency alert came through. The translation was immediate and horrifying. A plague had broken out on the mining colonies of Kepler 442b, spreading faster than medical teams could respond. 3 different species lived and worked on those colonies, and none of their immune systems seemed capable of fighting the infection. Estimated casualties if current progression continues? Marcus asked the holographic messenger. Total population loss within 47 standard days, came the grim reply. We've contacted medical authorities from 17 different systems. None have been able to provide effective treatment. After the messenger left, Marcus and Zarathiel sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. The Council will debate response protocols for weeks, she said quietly. By the time they approve relief efforts, there won't be anyone left to save. Marcus was studying the data on his screen, his expression thoughtful. What if we didn't wait for official approval? What do you mean? I mean, what if we went there ourselves, right now? Today, Zarathiel's 4 eyes widened. Marcus, neither of us are medical professionals. We have no authority to. We have something better than authority, Marcus interrupted. We have different perspectives. You're a xenobiologist who understands how different species interact with pathogens. I'm a human who's been trained to solve impossible problems with limited resources. Together, maybe we can see something the medical teams have missed. It's incredibly dangerous. The plague is killing people right now while we sit here talking about how dangerous it might be. Marcus stood up, his decision clearly made. Zarathiel, you once told me you wanted to contribute something useful to the universe instead of just being a symbol. This is that chance. She was quiet for a long moment, and he could see her analytical mind working through the possibilities. You're right, she said finally. But we'll need a ship, supplies, and already working on it, Marcus said, his fingers flying over his communication panel. Humans are very good at rapid deployment when lives are at stake. 4 hours later, they were aboard a fast human courier ship heading toward Kepler 442b. The crew was minimal, just a pilot and a communications officer, but the cargo hold was packed with supplies that Marcus had somehow acquired through what he called creative requisitioning. How did you manage to get all this so quickly? Zarathiel asked as she examined crates of medical equipment, portable laboratories, and emergency shelter systems. Humans have a saying, it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission, Marcus replied. When people are dying, bureaucracy becomes a luxury we can't afford. Zarathiel was beginning to understand that this was fundamentally different from how her own people approached crisis management. Zephyrians planned, organized, formed committees, and followed protocols. Marcus simply acted, trusting that the details could be worked out later. They reached Kepler 442b 18 hours ahead of the official relief mission. The mining colonies were in chaos. The main medical facility was overwhelmed, with patients from 3 different species displaying symptoms that seemed to defy every treatment approach. Dr. Kexvar, the head of the medical team, met them at the landing platform. His exhaustion was obvious in every line of his reptilian body. Your Highness, Commander Chun, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not sure what you can accomplish here. We've tried every antiviral, every antibiotic, every immunological therapy in our databases. The pathogen seems to adapt to every treatment we attempt. That's because you're thinking about this wrong, Marcus said bluntly. You're trying to fight the pathogen. What if instead we tried to help the patients? Dr. Kexvar's head tilted in confusion. I don't understand the difference. Zarathiel stepped forward, her analytical mind already working. Show us the progression data, Doctor. Not treatment attempts progression. How does the infection spread through different biological systems? For the next 6 hours, Zarathiel pored over medical data while Marcus toured the colonies, talking to patients, observing symptoms, and asking questions that no one else had thought to ask. It's not one pathogen, Zarathiel announced suddenly as they reconvened in the makeshift laboratory they had set up. It's three different pathogens that are interacting with each other and with the unique environmental conditions here. Explain, Doctor. Kexvar demanded. Marcus pulled up a holographic display of the mining operations. The colonies are built around a rare mineral extraction process. That process creates atmospheric conditions that don't exist anywhere else. The pathogens aren't just infecting people, they're being modified by the environment itself. Which means, Zarathiel continued, that traditional treatments are failing because they're designed for normal atmospheric conditions. We're not fighting the disease in the patient's bodies, we're fighting an entirely new form of life that's being created by the interaction between pathogens and processed rare minerals. Dr. Kexvar stared at them. That's impossible to treat. Not impossible, Marcus said quietly. Just complicated. Zarathiel, what happens if we modify the atmospheric processors to change the mineral interaction? She was quiet for several minutes, her eyes unfocused as she worked through the calculations. If we can alter the atmospheric composition by just 3%, the pathogen interaction should destabilize. But Marcus, that would require shutting down the mining operations entirely. The economic impact will be zero if everyone dies, Marcus finished. Dr. Kexvar, can you implement atmospheric changes? In theory, yes, but the mining companies will never agree to. Marcus was already activating his communication array. This is Commander Chun of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. I need to speak to the mining operations supervisors immediately. When the three supervisors appeared on the holographic display, a Centaurian, a Bethan, and a human, Marcus didn't waste time with pleasantries. Gentlemen, I need you to shut down all mineral processing operations immediately. Absolutely not, the Centaurian responded immediately. Do you have any idea what that would cost? About the same as replacing your entire workforce when they're all dead. Marcus replied calmly. The human supervisor leaned forward. Chun, what's the real situation here? Marcus gestured to Zarathiel, who quickly explained her analysis. The three supervisors listened with expressions ranging from skepticism to concern. You're asking us to risk millions of credits on a theory, the Bethan said slowly. I'm asking you to risk profits to save lives, Marcus replied. But let me put this in terms you might understand better. If this plague spreads beyond the colonies, it could affect every mining operation in this system. Shut down now and lose 3 days of profits or risk losing entire markets for years. The human supervisor was nodding. How long do you need? 72 hours, Zarathiel said immediately. Done, the human said, then looked at his colleagues. Anyone who wants to argue with saving lives can explain their position to the families of the dead. The atmospheric changes began immediately. Within 6 hours, new patients stopped appearing. Within 12 hours, existing patients began showing improvement. Within 24 hours, the pathogen interaction had destabilized completely, and conventional treatments were working again. Dr. Kexvar found them in the medical facility as they prepared to leave. Your Highness, Commander Chung, I owe you an apology. I've never seen anything like what you accomplished here. We didn't cure the plague, Doctor, Zarathiel replied. We just looked at it differently. But how? How did you see what 17 different medical teams missed? Marcus and Zarathiel exchanged glances. It was Marcus who answered. Doctor, every medical team that came here did exactly what they were trained to do. They followed protocols, applied established treatments, and worked within their areas of expertise. They did everything right. Then why did their approaches fail? Because sometimes doing everything right isn't enough, Zarathiel said gently. Sometimes you need to do something that's never been tried before. Humans have a talent for seeing impossible problems as interesting puzzles, Marcus added. And Zephyrians have a gift for understanding complex systems. Separately, we might have missed the solution too. Together, we could see possibilities that neither of our species would have considered alone. 3 weeks later, they stood in the ceremonial hall where they had first met, watching as representatives from dozens of species gathered for what the media was calling the Kepler Accords. The mining colonies had not only recovered, but had become the site of the first interspecies medical research facility designed to study pathogen interactions in unique environments. You realize what you've done, don't you? Chancellor Vexari asked them quietly. Saved some lives, Marcus replied with characteristic human understatement. You've changed how the galaxy thinks about cooperation, Vexari corrected. Species that have maintained separate medical systems for centuries are now sharing research. Mining operations across 17 systems are implementing atmospheric monitoring protocols. And diplomatic relationships that were stagnant for decades are suddenly producing innovations. Princess. 3 weeks after the disastrous courting ceremony, Princess Zarathiel found herself in a place she had never expected to be, genuinely curious about another being. Commander Marcus Chen had requested permission to spend time with her, not in formal diplomatic settings, but in what he called getting to know each other like normal people. The concept was so foreign to her life of rigid protocol that she had agreed partly out of pure curiosity. They met in the palace's observation garden, a sprawling space where thousands of plant species from across the galaxy grew in carefully controlled environmental zones. It was one of the few places where Zarathiel could move freely without constantly being observed by courtiers and diplomats. Tell me about Earth, she said as they walked slowly along a path lined with singing crystals from Altair 7. Marcus had insisted that she set the pace, and to her surprise, he seemed genuinely comfortable with her slower movement. Depends which part, Marcus replied, stooping to examine a flowering vine that changed colors as it responded to their presence. Earth has every kind of environment you can imagine. Deserts that'll kill you in an hour, ice caps that haven't seen warmth in millions of years, forests so thick you can't see the sky, and oceans deep enough to hide entire mountain ranges. That sounds chaotic, Zarathiel observed. It is, and humans love it. Marcus straightened, his expression thoughtful. See, most species I've met seem to prefer controlled environments. Predictable patterns, humans. We're the opposite. We see a mountain, we want to climb it. We see an ocean, we want to cross it. We see a desert, and we figure out how to live there anyway. They paused by a small pond where earth goldfish swam alongside bioluminescent jellies from the vegan system. Zarathiel watched them navigate around each other with seemingly impossible coordination. The other species that came to court me, she began slowly, they all seem to have very specific requirements. Genetic markers, physical capabilities, ceremonial obligations. Do humans have similar specifications for choosing partners? Marcus was quiet for so long that she wondered if her question had been inappropriate. When he finally answered, his voice was careful. Some do. Humans aren't perfect, and we definitely have our shallow members. But the best of us ... We tend to fall in love with minds, with hearts, with the way someone sees the universe. The rest is just packaging. Packaging, she repeated, tasting the foreign concept. My grandmother used to say that bodies are just vehicles for souls. She'd lost her legs in an accident when she was young, but she could outthink, outmaneuver, and outstubborn anyone I ever met. She taught me that the most important parts of a person are the parts you can't see. Zarathiel stopped walking and turned to face him directly. Is that why you approached me? Because you feel sympathy for my situation? Marcus met her gaze steadily. I approached you because in 3 hours of watching that ceremony, you were the most interesting person in the room. You handled rejection with grace, cruelty with dignity, and stupidity with patience. And when I asked what you wanted from life, your eyes lit up like stars. That had nothing to do with sympathy and everything to do with recognition. Recognition of what? Someone worth knowing. Over the following days, their meetings became routine. Marcus would arrive each morning with questions that no one had ever asked her before. Not about policy or breeding potential or ceremonial protocols, but about her thoughts on xenobiology, her theories about cultural development, her opinions on art and music and literature. You're documenting my responses, she accused him one afternoon as they sat in her private study. Marcus had been asking about her research into parallel evolution across different star systems. Guilty, he admitted cheerfully, making notes on his tablet. But not for the reasons you might think. Then why? Marcus set down his tablet and looked at her seriously. Because everything you say is fascinating, and I don't want to forget any of it. You have insights that could revolutionize how we understand species development. You've connected patterns that no one else has even noticed. Zarathiel felt something warm spread through her chest. You really believe that? I don't believe it. I know it. The paper you wrote on cultural adaptation in low-gravity environments? I sent it to our Xenobiological Research Division. They're calling it groundbreaking. She stared at him. You did what? With your permission, I'd like to send them more. Humans are collaborative by nature. We believe that knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. Your work could help dozens of species better understand their own development. For the first time in weeks, Zarathiel felt her composure crack. Marcus, I've been publishing that research for years. No one pays attention. Academic journals print it and file it away. You're telling me that humans would actually use it? Use it, build on it, improve it, and share the results back with you. That's how humans work. We're not territorial about ideas the way some species are. That evening, Princess Zarathiel called her personal chancellor to her chambers. Vexari entered with his usual formal bearing, but she could sense his underlying concern. Your Highness, there has been considerable discussion about your association with the human commander. Some courtiers feel that entertaining his attention after the rejection of more suitable candidates sends the wrong message. Define suitable, she said quietly. Your Highness knows that the Empire requires certain standards. The Empire requires that I choose a partner who will strengthen our position in the galaxy. Zarathiel interrupted. Is that not correct, Chancellor? Indeed, Princess, but... Then let me share something interesting, Chancellor. In the past 3 weeks, Commander Chun has facilitated more meaningful diplomatic progress than we achieved in the previous 3 years. His people are sharing technology, offering research collaborations, and proposing trade agreements that would benefit dozens of worlds. And he's doing it not through formal negotiations, but through casual conversations over lunch. Vexari's harmonics shifted to surprised confusion. I was not aware... Because you've been focused on genetic markers and ceremonial requirements. Commander Chun is building relationships. And humans, Chancellor, have something that every other species I've encountered seems to lack. Which is what, Your Highness? They see potential where others see problems. They see opportunity where others see obstacles. And they see people where others see categories. The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment. Are you saying that you wish to formally consider the human's petition? I'm saying that I want to understand what makes his species so different. And I want to understand why he looks at me and sees possibilities instead of limitations. 2 days later, Marcus arrived at the palace to find Zarathiel waiting in the formal, receiving hall instead of their usual meeting place in the gardens. She was dressed in full ceremonial robes, and her expression was unreadable. Your Highness? Is everything all right? Marcus, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer with complete honesty, always. What do you want from me? What do humans gain from this association? Because I've learned enough about your species to know that you don't do anything without strategic thinking behind it. Marcus studied her face for a moment, noting the tension in her posture. Something had changed. You're right, he said finally. We are strategic thinkers. But you're wrong about what we're thinking about. He stepped closer, his voice becoming more personal. Humans don't look at relationships as transactions. We look at them as investments. Not in what we can get, but in what we can become. Explain. Most species seem to think that partnerships are about combining existing strengths. Like 2 companies merging to dominate a market. Humans think partnerships are about creating new possibilities that didn't exist before. Marcus gestured toward the vast windows that looked out over the palace grounds. Look, your people are brilliant at organization, at stability, at creating systems that work for centuries. My people are brilliant at adaptation, at innovation, at finding solutions to impossible problems. Separately, we're both good. Together, we could be extraordinary. And what would that look like? I don't know yet, Marcus admitted. That's what makes it exciting. But I can tell you what I dream about. Zarathiel leaned forward slightly. Tell me. I dream about you and me exploring the galaxy together. Not as a human and a Zephyrian, but as two people who are curious about everything. I dream about combining your analytical mind with human adaptability. I dream about showing you worlds where you can study cultural development firsthand, and I dream about you showing me how to see patterns I've never noticed. His voice grew softer. I dream about us building something entirely new. Not a human relationship or a Zephyrian alliance, but something that's uniquely ours. Zarathiel was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. The other species that came to court me ... They all wanted to know what they could get from an alliance with the Empire. You're the first being who's ever asked what we could create together. Because I'm not interested in what already exists. I'm interested in what's possible. She stood up suddenly, moving to the window to look out at the palace gardens where they had spent so many hours talking. Marcus, there's something you need to know about Zephyrian biology. Something that none of the grand ceremonial hall of the Zephyrian Imperial Palace stretched beyond what most species could see in a single glance. Crystalline walls reached toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars themselves, while bioluminescent patterns danced across surfaces that had witnessed 1,000 years of diplomatic gatherings. Today, however, the magnificent space felt more like a marketplace than a palace. Princess Zarathiel sat perfectly still in her ceremonial chair, a masterwork of living metal that responded to neural impulses. Her forearms rested at precise angles, 2 on the armrests and 2 folded across her lap, while her silver-scaled tail curved elegantly around the chair's base. To most observers, she appeared the picture of royal dignity. Only someone watching very carefully might notice that her lower arms never moved independently, or that her tail remained in exactly the same position throughout the entire proceedings. Commander Marcus Chun of the Terran Diplomatic Corps stood near the back of the assembly, his simple dark uniform making him nearly invisible among the elaborate dress of dozens of species. He had arrived on Zephyros Prime 3 days ago, as part of humanity's first official diplomatic contact with the Zephyrian Empire. What he had not expected was to walk into what appeared to be an elaborate courting ritual. The princess requires a strong mate to ensure the continuation of the imperial bloodline, announced High Chancellor Vexari, his voice carrying the harmonics that marked his species' formal speech patterns. Today, representatives from 17 stellar nations present themselves for consideration. Marcus watched as a Kralian warrior stepped forward, his chitinous armor clicking with each movement. The being stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 powerful legs and arms that could crush steel. I am War Master Thecalon of the Kralian Hives, he declared, his voice rumbling through translation devices. My genetic markers show compatibility with Zephyrian physiology. My brood pods have produced 47 offspring. I offer strength to strengthen the imperial line. Princess Zarathiel inclined her head politely. War Master Thecalon, your reputation precedes you. Your military victories are well documented. Indeed, Thecalon replied, then paused as his optical sensors focused on her lower body. Marcus noticed the warrior's posture shift slightly, and his next words carried a different tone. However, I must ask about the ... functionality of your secondary limbs, Your Highness. Kralian tradition requires that both parents be capable of full participation in offspring care. I see that your lower arms appear ... inactive. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush planets. Marcus watched the princess's face, noting how her expression remained perfectly composed even as something flickered in her large, multifaceted eyes. My lower arm suffered neural damage during an assassination attempt when I was young, she said quietly. They retain some sensation but limited mobility. My tail was affected similarly. Thecalon's head tilted in what Marcus recognized as the Kralian equivalent of a dismissive shrug. Then I must respectfully withdraw my petition. The Kralian hives require genetic perfection in all alliances. As the warrior clicked away, Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't courtship, it was selection based on breeding potential and physical perfection. Veltharian diplomat glided forward next, her energy form shifting through soft blues and greens. I am Harmony Singer Lithara. Her translated voice carried the ethereal quality of her people. Veltharians value mental acuity above physical form. Princess Zarathiel, your scholarly achievements are remarkable. However, she paused, her form flickering. Our bonding process requires perfect neural synchronization. Any interruption in neural pathways would make true union impossible. Another polite withdrawal. Another rejection phrased in diplomatic language that couldn't quite hide its cruelty, the parade continued. The Centaurian representative expressed concerns about genetic complications. The Andromedan spoke of physical requirements for ceremonial duties. Each rejection was polite. Formal and devastating, Marcus found himself studying the princess more carefully. When she thought no one was looking, he caught glimpses of something raw and hurt in her expression. But whenever attention turned to her, she became the perfect image of royal composure again. During a brief recess, Marcus made his way through the crowd, listening to conversations in dozens of languages, all filtering through his translation implant. Shame about the princess, a Rigelian attached was saying to his companion. Beautiful enough and certainly intelligent. But damaged goods, you know? The Empire will have to lower their standards, replied a Bethan trader. Maybe find some minor house desperate for the connection. Marcus stopped walking. The casual cruelty in their voices hit him like a physical blow. These beings were talking about Princess Zarathiel like she was merchandise with defects, something to be discounted and sold off to whoever was desperate enough to overlook her flaws. He looked back toward where the princess sat, now speaking quietly with her chancellor. From this angle, he could see how tightly she held herself, the careful control in every line of her body. He thought about what she must be hearing, day after day. As potential suitors found polite ways to call her inadequate, the recess ended and more representatives stepped forward. A Plutonian Gestalt being withdrew after learning about her. Incomplete neural network. A Capellan energy lord cited incompatibilities with our essence-sharing rituals. Each rejection felt like watching someone die by degrees. Finally, the Chancellor called for any remaining petitions. The hall had grown noticeably emptier as species departed, apparently unwilling to waste time on what they clearly saw as a doomed selection process. Marcus found himself walking forward before he had fully decided to do so. His boots made soft sounds on the crystalline floor that seemed unnaturally loud in the vast space. Commander Chun of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, the Chancellor announced, his voice carrying surprise. Do you wish to observe the remaining ceremonies? Actually, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet, I'd like to formally request permission to address Princess Zarathiel. A ripple of surprise ran through the remaining assembly. Humans were new to the galactic community, barely a century past their first faster-than-light travel. They were known as a curious but relatively primitive species. Certainly not candidates for imperial marriages. The princess looked directly at him for the first time, her multifaceted eyes catching the light in a way that reminded him of Earth's aurora. You may speak, Commander Chun. Marcus stepped closer, then did something that caused gasps throughout the hall. He knelt on one knee before her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. Your Highness, he began, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. I've listened to a lot of speeches today about genetic compatibility and physical requirements and ceremonial functions, but I haven't heard anyone ask what I think might be the most important question. Princess Zarathiel leaned forward slightly. And what question is that, Commander? Marcus met her gaze directly. What do you want? What do you dream about? What makes you laugh? What challenges you? What do you care about more than anything else in the universe? The silence that followed was different from the earlier uncomfortable pauses. This felt like the moment when a held breath is finally released. The princess began, then stopped. Marcus could see her struggling with something, as if she had forgotten how to answer such questions about herself. Take your time, he said gently. I'm not going anywhere. She studied his face for a long moment. You're serious. Completely. I've been watching this process, and it seems like everyone's been evaluating you like you're a piece of equipment. But you're not equipment. You're a person. And I'd like to know who that person is. Princess Zarathiel's expression shifted, becoming something Marcus couldn't quite read. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more personal. I want to see the galaxy, she said slowly. Not from diplomatic shuttles or ceremonial platforms, but really see it. I want to understand how different species solve problems, how they create art, how they find meaning. I want to contribute something useful to the universe instead of just being a symbol. What stops you? She gestured toward her motionless lower arms. I'm not exactly built for exploration, Commander. And my duties to the Empire ... With respect, Your Highness, Marcus interrupted gently, I've seen the reports of your academic work. You've written papers on xenobiology, stellar mechanics, and cultural anthropology that are considered groundbreaking across multiple species. Your mind explores the galaxy every day. He stood up slowly. As for your arms, humans have a saying, it's not the equipment that makes the person. It's how they choose to face the universe. I've met soldiers with all their limbs who couldn't think their way out of an empty room. And I've met scientists in hover chairs who could outmaneuver anyone on the battlefield of ideas. The princess's eyes widened. You don't see me as incomplete? Marcus shook his head. I see someone who survived an assassination attempt and turned that experience into strength. Someone who could have become bitter but chose scholarship instead. Someone whose mind is so remarkable that an entire hall full of beings felt intimidated by her intelligence. Even as they pretended to reject her for other reasons,